Welcome to Questions We're Afraid to Ask.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We are here with another great question. The question is, what happened to the Malaysian Airlines plane? And we've got Ashton here to talk to us about it. It's insane. This has been wild. I came across you on, I think it was the Danny Jones podcast when that came out, and was just watched that and thought, well, you did not get a fair shake. That was ridiculous to watch that. The level of being willing to just like, well, I don't see any difference. You know, that was the one that I was screaming at my TV. It's right there. You can see the lines don't match. What are you talking about? You know.
And what's funny is I have no idea what's going on, but my phone starts blowing up with, look at this image. Look at this image. These people are stupid. They won't give him a and I'm like, what is happening? And he's like, we're doing a podcast. I was like, okay. But I remember when all this happened. Well, thank you. Yes. And again, thank you so much for coming on our humble little podcast. I remember when all this originally happened, and then it just like went away in my brain. Right.
It did.
And I remember some stuff going on the internet, and then it got pulled, and it was just like, just a thing that went away. And Daniel has dove down the rabbit hole quite a bit. And I've kind of thought, okay, once he said that you were going to come on, I was like, okay, well, I'm not going to get super in depth in everything. So I can come at it from, all right, well, these are some like logical questions I have, right? Sure. So I'm not coming from a debunky type of way. It's just like how my brain works.
I mean, obviously, if you watch Danny Jones' podcast, you can tell I'm not afraid of debunkers or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, that was an interesting situation.
He was definitely projecting near the end there of just like, you seem angry. I'm like, no, I think you're upset that he's not. you didn't bite at the trick is what I thought that was.
So I will preface this from, I'm open to a lot of things because I personally knew a guy who, ex-military, who worked over in Turkey and told me about how he was the first guy who knew Desert Storm was happening because he was a communication specialist. And then admitted to me, you know, I worked at Area 51, and the only reason I tell you that is they caught me on film getting onto the airplane that they shuttle everybody back and forth out. And he wouldn't tell me anything other than weird stuff happens. And I never got anything more than that. So I'm open to the idea that there's a lot of stuff that we don't know, or maybe out there, or the government. I don't know who it is. And now around all this, and I'm not saying it's UFOs or aliens, but we've had so much crazy stuff come out since, the 2017 New York Times article. It's kind of opened the floodgates for legitimate science and questions to ask questions that have been laughed at for years. Yeah. So
that was like my awakening as well, right? In addition, I think a lot of people's awakening was, oh, wow, you see this New York Times article, you see the DOD declassifying these videos where, despite a lot of people who've tried to debunk real DOD videos, it's like it's not very explainable what we're seeing on those videos.
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've been into this weird stuff in general like my whole life. I've read about it my whole life. I've always been open to the idea that we don't know what we don't know. And you probably haven't had a chance to watch any of our podcasts, but we kind of come at this from, there's a level of arrogance we have as a species where we kind of figure we know everything. Mm-hmm. And it's continuously being proven wrong. For example, we just interviewed the director of the Galt site, which is an archaeology site, or archaeological site here in Texas, where they found evidence that just proves that people have been here for over 20,000 years, blowing all the Clovis stuff away. So just something as simple as that. Just because we haven't found it yet doesn't mean it's not here. So, and this airline thing, I remember thinking, like, how did we find no debris?
Yeah,
right.
And then I remember reading an article or hearing somebody say, well, we found parts of that plane and it washed up. And apparently it was some other plane that was similar or something. But I thought I read something about that, but I could be remembering wrong.
But only one of them would have been identifiable, if I remember correctly. But the plate was missing. The bolted-on identifier plate just happened to be missing.
Oh, the serial number's gone. Yeah, that's convenient.
Yeah, we're missing the unique serial plate on the flaperon, which is the one that they were able to use. They found two other serial numbers that are like part serial numbers, right? And they don't mention that. It's like, how are they not mentioning that they didn't use a unique serial number to match this. Because, well, the answer is that they want people to think that we found the plane, right? But the reality is when you find 3 pieces, tiny pieces of a 777, that's not like finding the plane, like at all,
Yeah.
right?
No.
Well,
but it does make the thing go away, right? In the minds of a lot of people out there.
It does.
It worked for me. You know,
Yeah.
I saw a little blurb in a headline
until
and
about 4 months ago. Yeah.
And
so
how did
I
you
was
first
gonna
stumble
ask-
across this? Because
Oh,
go ahead.
Did you find it on Reddit as well?
You guys want to know, Tim? Yeah, I did. And the weird part was that, you know, I saw it on Reddit around August 7th, August 8th. I saw the link that people said, you know, it had been posted in January, and all the comments are these weird comments about how much this hurts the families or whatever. And I'm looking at it like, wait, what? The family's got no answers. It's 10 years later, and nobody got any. The official story, literal official story that's out there is that we don't know what happened to the plane. It's like, what the heck? So, you know, I looked at that, and then the other thing that for me that like immediately struck me is that I remembered seeing the drone video, the thermal, the color one. And I remember seeing it in 2014, like probably the summer of 2014. Yeah. And I remember like this was way before I had ever risen to the level of thinking like, yes, UFOs must be out there, what have you, like that. And it was just, you know, I was back when I had CNN brain going on back then, 9 years ago, as I like to say. And then now looking at it again, like, wait a minute. Well, I remember seeing that. And then I saw the second video, the satellite one, and they were both in sync. And then I'm going, wait a minute. Like I've seen, since 2017, I've probably seen 1,000 UFO videos, you know, and a lot of them it's, you know, Starlink and Chinese lanterns. I mean, I'm not saying that's what they are, but that's how easy they are to dismiss, right? And then I see these and I'm like, wait a minute, how many times have I seen 2 videos that sync up perfectly, right? Like never. Because from a visual effects perspective, this means you now have to have a 3D rendered environment in order to get that stuff to sync up, which is you have 2 different angles, right? And we have the one that's like essentially horizontal to the plane. And then we have this one that's almost not quite vertical, but like low Earth orbit satellite level in terms of like at a specific angle that would be, you know, 1,000 kilometers out. It's potentially zoomed in. And that's when I got, you know, compelled to say, okay, I'm going to take a look at this. Right. And I immediately was like, I should probably start saving some of the analysis that people were doing. And if you guys were watching, you saw how much analysis people did right away. It was like every post on that subreddit, on this UFOs subreddit, which by the way is 100% controlled by the federal government. Just that subreddit is 100% controlled. But you know, every post every day was about it. And so within a couple of days, I was like, I saw the one where they were able to prove that the reason why the mouse had a different frame rate than the background was that it would match with a Citrix session logged into the satellite database.
Right.
And that's when I went, okay, now it's time to start looking at this seriously, because I knew that there would be a lot of prosaic debunk attempts of, oh, this looks like this, or this doesn't look right. But once you've proven that level of it, it's like, okay, well, at least the base footage must be true, right?
Right.
And that was when I started taking off with starting posting on this Twitter account. I had a Twitter account from 2014 that I like never used. I would reply to people occasionally, but I never really made any posts on it. And I'm like, okay, I think, you know, from the Twitter files and all that, I trusted that place to be the one that would not censor me very much. And obviously it hasn't, because I haven't got banned yet. And then the story just kind of took off from there. You know, after I think I looked back once when I was doing some of my research and like post analysis of my early posts, and found out, I think it was August 14th was the day where I put the media on the clock and I asked the media to take it. I pinged all these major news stations and stuff like that. And, you know, this was back me being naive 4 months ago, thinking, oh yeah, ABC and NBC are going to be all over this. They want to figure out what happened to the plane. Right. And now what's that, 4 months later, and nobody has pinged me at all about it. And now I'm like, oh, okay, obviously they're controlled by the government and they're being told not to look at this, because it's not like it's a ridiculous story. They do all kinds of ridiculous stories that are nonsense every single day. And that's when I decided on August 14th, after nobody chimed in, that, okay, I'm going to do this myself. I guess I'm a citizen journalist now, which at the time was kind of a coy title I gave myself. But, you know, now I would argue that I've done more investigative journalism than all the mainstream medias combined over the same period of time. Maybe not as much as alternative media has done, but definitely of mainstream media.
It's fascinating, and we've talked about this, not on the podcast. We've talked about this, how platforms are available now, right? You can do this. 5 years ago, it would have been a lot harder, right? Even running a podcast cost a lot more money back then. But the ability to access information, find information, and then put your voice out there, whether people are going to respond or not, separate. But it doesn't cost you a fortune to get your ideas out and your information out. And I tend to look at whether something's legitimate or not in some way. Like, I don't know what the answer is, but there's smoke when people start screaming, right? Like, can't be this, got to debunk this, got to be, the stuff that people are just like, yeah, no, that's not anything. Okay. When there's nothing, when there's no pushback, when there's just zilch, right? That's when I'm like, okay, there's probably nothing there. But after doing just a couple of real quick searches, I was like, oh, everybody's going after you. So maybe now, and your theories could be completely wrong, but you're pointing at something somebody doesn't want you pointing at, right? And I don't remember if you remember the Mel Gibson movie Conspiracy Theory, where he's the crazy conspiracy guy, and he happens to publish one that's right. And he goes from being this little guy nobody pays attention to, now everybody's after him, right? So to me, that tells me like something's here, right? Something's there, or you wouldn't be getting this level of like visceral pushback. It's not just your normal internet trolls doing it.
And it feels a little more
that's what it looks like from the outside.
And I don't know if that's if that's coordination from somewhere beyond, or if it's just the corridor crew trying to damage control themselves, but it doesn't feel natural, the response. Let me put it that way.
Yeah. It doesn't feel organic, right? It feels like there's something going on there. I feel it too. It's just, I've never, even from what I've seen stuff, I've never seen such a visceral reaction, a very coordinated reaction to like, and some of them are some of the podcasters I've been on where you can tell there's a coordinated reaction. Like one of the podcasters that came out with some video coming out against me, who, by the way, he's now deleted all my interviews, which is interesting. I'm just going to say that's Julian Dory. He came out with this like completely ridiculous, cringy video where he finally put a shirt on for once in his life and tried to come out against me. And then everybody's retweeting it, right? Like instantly, everybody in the whole UFO community. He's only got like 2,000 followers on Twitter. And everyone's retweeting it. It's like, man, this is not coming off like organic at all, right? And there's been a lot of that as well. And so, I've noticed it too, for sure. And the thing that I would say, if you think of it this way, is like, whenever we see videos of just like lights in the sky moving around unusually, it's, why isn't it better quality? Why isn't it, whatever, this is Starlink. And then when we get perfect, highest quality cameras from the U.S. military from two different angles, then it's, oh, well, this is all CGI. This is all like, you literally can't win with people, right? Like no matter how you approach it. And that's what I find very interesting as well.
Yeah, Daniel and I were talking earlier today.
Good.
No, go ahead, Daniel.
I was going to say, on that, he and I were. Oh. If this has something to do with
the lag. You run with it.
Yeah, there's a bit of a lag. I wonder if this has anything to do with the pushback comes from the magnitude of what this actually means. Just on the level of, on the governmental secret level, and then on the like, well, apparently magic is real and the universe doesn't work the way that we thought that it did, and so.
It reminds
orbs. Oh, you go first, Bill.
Yeah, I was going to say it reminds me very much of the people who saw black triangles before Desert Storm, and we admitted the black jet was real, right? And that first F-117, and everybody was seeing the triangle UFO fly around, and no, that's nothing, and they, personal assassinations make them look like crazy UFO freaks and all that stuff. I remember that because I knew people who lived near and around a lot of military bases growing up, and you would hear that kind of thing, and you would see it on the news, and you would be like, these crazy kooks, and then poof, oh, we've been seeing a secret military program. Wow, they must have just invented it. And now it's fascinating looking back and seeing that they developed those things in the 70s, and they'd been around since like the early 80s, designed to fly in and nuke Moscow before, the World War III started. And so how far ahead are we actually, right? whether we found something and backward researched it, whether it's just good R&D, where really are we technologically? And something happened in those videos and the plane just not there. I don't know the physics well enough to explain what's happening, but the idea that we haven't figured something like that out is absurd. Just look at some of the things that the people who've come out of Skunkworks have said, no, the stuff you're seeing on TV, the sci-fi, we're 100 years past that, right? I jokingly say that the old Stargate TV show was a documentary that just hasn't been released yet. With all the stuff, all the advancements and crazy stuff that happens there. So somebody who wants to say we couldn't be there, I don't know if we are or not, but the idea that our government's not secretly researching stuff, that we don't have something to push a button in case China, Russia, Japan, whoever wants to do something. Of course, we're not going to want that public, right? And so I'm wondering if that's what this is, because we know the government lies to us. Been doing it for years, sometimes for very legitimate reasons. I don't know. That's what this feels like.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head right there. I mean, that's the same conclusion I've come to. That's the people that I've interviewed. I think that's the implication and the logical conclusion that we've come to get from that. I wish that we didn't have orbs and teleportation in this video, because then I think that it would be a lot easier for people to admit that's MH370. I think it would basically be undeniable. I mean, the fact that what we're seeing, there's a 777-200 with consistent capabilities of a 777-200 while in descent, while in a turn, that alone is difficult enough to fake, right? But when you add the orbs, when you add this macroscopic phase conjugation event, where you can think of it like quantum entanglement, the analogy that people have used is like a rubber band, right? Imagine there's a fourth orb somewhere and you're stretching this rubber band. And then when the three orbs converge on the plane, all of a sudden it snaps back. And now the plane is going at hyperspeed, if you want to think of it like that, superluminal speeds, faster than the speed of light to the location of the fourth orb. It does seem like cheating, but magic is just science that we have yet to understand. And I think that if you think of it like this as well, is for the people out there that believe that aliens are visiting us, that believe that what David Grush, whistleblower, has said to Congress under oath, that we have alien bodies, right? Unless you believe in the ultra-terrestrial hypothesis that they are on planet in the ocean or something, if they've traveled to us, how are they getting here? Like, do you really think they're getting here with propulsion that would take hundreds of years? Like, no, come on, they're not doing that, right? We need another mechanism to be able to travel faster than the speed of light. Zeta Reticuli, the one where everybody says whatever aliens are coming from, is 40 light years away. The closest star, Alpha Centauri, is 4 light years away. You've got to have a mechanism to either go at light speed or faster than light speed. And I think that if you want to reconcile all of this, then it comes down to, figuring out a unifying theory of quantum and quantum mechanics and general relativity of macroscopic and quantum. And my personal belief is it's been figured out. And it's been figured out since at least 2014. Right? It's not like we've been doing nothing since the 40s, since we...
Right. Einstein was working on, the Einstein-Rosen bridge wormhole theories and stuff back in the 30s and the 40s. And it's like somebody, I don't remember where I heard it the other day, but somebody was saying, like, the atom bomb, we knew how to make one theoretically, decades before we made one, and it was an engineering problem. So all it takes is for somebody to figure out the math, and then it becomes an engineering problem, right? I'm not saying it's an easy engineering problem, but it's an engineering problem. And we know that simple patents, like public invention patents, get taken away under a National Security Act. That has nothing to do with, like, the privately government-funded research that's going on. The Manhattan Project, like you said, it didn't stop, right? And now, the latest Grush thing, I don't know if you saw him on Rogan when he was there the last time. He was saying, like, the oldest one I can tell you about was something that happened in the 30s in Italy. And we eventually got our hands on it after World War II, after the Germans and the Italians had their hands on it. And they said, well, is that the oldest one? He's like, That's the oldest one I can talk about.
Yeah.
You know, and the fact that they won't give just the fact that you've got somebody saying, I was ordered to investigate this stuff. I did my job. They covered it up, and I'm trying to tell Congress about it. And they won't give the Congress people who are authorized to hear it the skiff room just to hear his testimony. I mean, they'll do that for almost anything. But, you know, they're shutting that down. And then Daniel was telling me the Schumer thing just got shut down today, it looks like. The whistleblower bill or whatever you're trying to push. Yeah.
I'm not sure. Grush was on News Nation, but I couldn't find anything official.
I know they're trying to kill it in the House. They didn't want to piss off Schumer, so they didn't do it in the Senate, but now they're trying to kill it in the House. But all of this gets into, and to get back to the specific here, so you saw what sucked you in completely? What pulled you into this rabbit hole where you just couldn't let it go? That's the story I'm in, because I've heard people talk about like what happened and try to debunk it, but I'm curious about your journey through this. What's it been like to go through?
Yeah. I mean, I think that the weight of the evidence and constantly come up with finding more evidence I didn't think would be there is what made it so compelling for me. You know, there's one piece that I wrote, I think, called like How We Got Here, which goes through that journey of where we started, kind of some of the stuff I already mentioned as well about becoming a citizen journalist. But some of the big things that came up was I used to trust all the official data and narrative as well. I looked at this Whisper report that's 300 pages long. One night I stayed up all night reading all 300 pages, going like, there's got to be a clue in here. And I remember going on podcasts being like, okay, and now after you get past Penang, now the Whisper report says it's hugging the coast of Indonesia, and now it's doing a cutback, looking to see if anyone's behind it, and now it's in this holding pattern for 20 minutes. And I remember telling people on this podcast, like, I have a hard time understanding how a plane is doing all this stuff while it's on some kind of suicide route. And it wasn't until much later that I realized that Whisper report's complete nonsense. It's all garbage, complete junk. And it's all just some fantasy that this guy wrote up because, and the reason why you have all this weird stuff happening is that he can't find pings that match up for the flight to keep going in a normal pattern. So he's like trying to, put stuff together that doesn't go together. And the way we were able to figure that out is because we were looking for the satellites, trying to figure out, okay, what satellite would be in the area, right? And then we find out USA 229 is down. Actually, we found out that when we look at the satellite coordinates on the satellite video, if you added a minus sign to the front of it, then you would realize that it would actually go through the Whisper route to like an uncanny degree, but it was in the South Indian Ocean and not at the point where it ends, but like at a point where it's like going directly south. And I thought, oh, well, this has got to be the proof, right? This has got to be the smoking gun. And then we looked for the satellites. We couldn't find any satellite that was there at the right time for it to be able to take that video. And then we started wondering, oh, well, can a plane teleport twice and all this stuff that is like seemed like it just takes too much to be able to wrap our brain around. And then it got simplified. There was a epiphany point where we actually just mapped out the coordinates that we see in the video as they shift. Because we realized, well, we were trying to figure out, is it mirrored? Is it upside down or something because of like the way the satellite's looking down? But we realized if we just map out the coordinates on a map, you can't mirror the coordinate shifts. So the coordinates are like either shifting south into the east, or if you invert it, then it's going north into the east. But if you're flying north into the east, you'd be turning right. And if you're flying south into the east, then you're turning left. And in both our videos, the plane's turning left. So this proved that it's not the South Indian Ocean. There can't be a minus sign. It means it had to be the Nicobar Islands and had to be turning south into the east. And so once we figured that out, I started looking up at witnesses because I'm like, oh, well, I wonder if there's any witnesses around. Sure enough, there's a witness right underneath in that location. Yeah. Catherine T. Right, same spot. And I started looking at the times, and the time is like really close, within like 30 minutes. So I'm like, I got to talk to this woman, right? I end up talking to her, getting in touch with her. She doesn't really follow the case, even after I'm like trying to get her into it. And I end up doing like an interview with her to like ask her my own questions, even though like all her sightings well documented going back to 2014. And she tells me, oh, I think the sighting was 1840 UTC. That's the time that we have the satellites staring right down. That's the time where, if you look at all the official reports the next day, they say that air traffic control lost contact with the plane at 1840 UTC. They don't change that until
their mind on that. Yeah.
Yeah. Then they're like, oh, no, it was actually 1815 that we lost radar. It's like, well, why were you announcing it was 1840 the very next day then? Like, if I'm going to believe data, the first thing I'm going to believe is the stuff you said right away, right? And then they started obfuscating to a huge degree. were searching the South China Sea, even though they knew it went into the Andaman Sea like right away. Catherine T then, she sees this plane glowing orange. So that was the next breakthrough, where I'm sitting here trying to figure out how a plane can be glowing orange. And this, if you listen to my Confessionals podcast, I'm trying to figure out, is this an emergency event or is this espionage? We've got these fake passengers on board. Maybe it's an espionage event, a hijacking, and they're trying to take the plane. Or maybe this is an emergency event that I couldn't really explain at the time. And I was actually all on board the espionage scenario at that time. If you listen to that podcast, that was where my narrative was at that point, or my personal belief. But then I realized that the plane's not glowing orange from the orbs. These orbs are going like 2,000 miles an hour. Plane's not outrunning them. I was trying to figure out, like, could these orbs have been chasing the plane from the South China Sea? But it made no sense. The plane's just glowing orange because it had been on fire, because they're battling with the halon fire extinguishing devices for an hour. And this chemical reaction that's happening from fighting the lithium-ion battery fire is releasing bromine, which is a chemical halogen gas. And the picture that she has, that she says, this is what the plane looked like, it looks like a halogen lamp in the middle of the night, right? And so it's like, oh, wow, that's a much simpler explanation. I've been wondering, there had to be something tied to these 221 kilograms of lithium-ion batteries. There's just so much. That's a lot of lithium-ion batteries, guys, like 500 pounds. And so this is like how it's been so compelling, right? Go ahead.
If I'm remembering back to 2014, that's when, because Daniel and I both work in the tech industry, there were some bad batteries back then. There was some bad battery fires.
Nearly as safe.
No.
And these were apparently not assembled well either.
Yeah, no. And there were several recalls across multiple industries about those kind of batteries. And once those go, they have everything they need in the battery. Once it's hot enough and combusts. If anyone's never seen one of those, it's terrifying to see a lithium-ion battery go, and
they don't go out.
No,
it's called runaway lithium-ion battery fire. And you put them out and they come back up again. I urge people to go Google it right now. I did not realize how dangerous they were. That was the other thing. I didn't realize how dangerous these things were. I started looking it up. A bunch of planes that burned up. A bunch of people died. Most of them were like cargo planes. But in 2015, the FAA outlaws them in the cargo of passenger planes pretty much for this reason.
There's a reason.
Because of how dangerous they were, right?
About the only way I know with like a one-off battery going off, most places that work on those have what they call a fire safe, which is a fireproofed safe that they toss it into, and they put inert sand on it and then seal the safe and leave it and just let it kind of burn itself out. But it massively dangerous chemicals. And we just kind of treat them like they're nothing.
Those cargo bays are built to withstand them up to 1,700 degrees, but they can burn even hotter than that. So you can imagine a scenario where they're desperately trying to keep it out, but it just keeps coming back up, right? Then people might even have died while they were trying to battle it because you've got this toxic smoke billowing out there. So definitely a very dangerous event. And that's corroborated by not just Catherine T, because then I go look and say, okay, well, what about these other witnesses that everybody's just discredited? It turns out they've all seen it. I brought them all back into the game. It's like, okay, Mike McKay sees at the same moment the plane goes dark. He sees the plane on fire. It's like, how is he getting dismissed? Like, this dude actually saw the battery ignite, the fire ignite. And then it's like, okay, well, now there's 9 witnesses on the coast that hear loud noises at the same time. Well, they're hearing the lithium-ion batteries explode. Right. And then it's like, okay, well, if they exploded, it's 500 pounds of lithium-ion batteries. Like, this is going to be like a small bomb going off. So presumably it depressurized the plane, probably caused some damage to the plane. And then this would be why the pilot would be flying low, because you're trying to get people oxygen. It turns out there's 8 people on a boat 10 minutes later that see the plane flying low. So, I mean, it blows my mind that these experts all dismissed every single witness that all tell the same story about a fire. And instead, they want to believe some Inmarsat pings, where the Inmarsat pings, the chain of custody is it went from Inmarsat to the Malaysian government to the family, and then it gets to these independent group investigators who posted on their blog. I'm like, how is this the official release of this data? And nobody has corroborated this data. Nobody will corroborate the Inmarsat. There's other satellite companies. They won't. No one will corroborate it. Rolls-Royce doesn't release their engine data, where people have told me it's pinging every 15 seconds, which this should have like easily been able to corroborate whatever the plane had, or the plane went, or whatever. They're even asked, like the transport guys asked like the next day by a New York Times reporter. We've got clips of all this stuff. I mean, I went back through the press conference. I could not believe what I was listening to in retrospect. Like, hey, like, how can a plane actually just stop transmitting diagnostic data? Well, we're going to have to look into that as the investigation proceeds. He's like, isn't it just like a basic answer, a basic question? Well, we can't answer it. It's like, yeah, no, it's a basic question. They can't. Like, that's not how it works. There's not a button, turn off the Rolls-Royce transmissions. Like, so the official narrative makes no sense. I look at the Inmarsat data. I'm like, okay, I bet you like nobody in the world has looked at this Inmarsat data because the spreadsheet. I find this Reddit article or Reddit post about this guy who like looks at it. He's like, look at the SU log tab. I go look at it myself and I'm like, okay. I start scrolling down. I'm looking through the flight, like, from it takeoff. And it's like, okay, this all looks good. Just, dozens and dozens of rows of data. You get to 1839 and now there's just one of the columns just blank. One of the other ones just zeros going on. I'm like, wait, what? And it's like for like a page and a half, just zeros and blank rows. And then the next 5 hours where this plane is supposedly in the South Indian Ocean, it's 10 total rows for 5 hours of data, like 2 rows per hour. And I'm looking at it like, and there's like this pattern in it as well. And I'm just looking at it like someone could have easily just added this in here, like easily.
So I don't remember, but didn't like the pilot stop transmitting at some point officially? Like the radio calls stopped coming. If that happened, I'm wondering if you've reached out to anybody in the ham radio community, because one of the hobbies for ham radio hobbyists is to listen to the flight channels. We can't transmit. I'm a ham. I have my ham license. So I know a little bit about this. I have my first level license. I don't have the one where I can do the worldwide communication yet. But I know they like to listen into those conversations. So I don't know if you've reached out to any hams that may have been in that part of the world to see if they picked up any transmissions, like from the plane. It's just a road. I don't know if you've looked down at all.
No, it's an interesting one. What's the range on that? Do you have any idea?
I think, it depends, dude. The ham radio community is weird.
Depends on your antenna.
Depends on the size of the antenna. There are people who build antennas that are the size of a house or bigger. So it's just something you may want to think about looking into, because I know if they said that he officially stopped, and here's the other bit. If his radio is not transmitting far enough to get to the tower, which is possible if there's a fire or something like that, or problems with the electrical system, if there was anybody closer to him, and a lot of boats have hams and things like that, somebody might have picked something up.
Didn't another plane get a bad signal at some point?
Yeah, at the same time those fishermen see it 10 minutes after the plane goes dark, 1730 UTC, there's another 777 pilot flying in Narita to Japan, and they hear the pilot and the co-pilot supposedly, and they don't want to have their name go out there because they don't want to get themselves discredited, right? There was actually a press conference. Yeah, like it did Mike McKay. I mean, the guy in the oil rig lost his job. But actually in one of the early press conferences, they kind of give it away too, and they say the last communication was at 1730 UTC, but then they released after weeks and had tons of pressure, they end up releasing the official narrative of the communications, and that's 1719, that last one that says "Goodnight, Malaysian Airlines Flight 370." There's reason to believe they didn't lose communication at all, and a lot of people argue how could they even lose communication. The reason for that is if you watch the Malaysian Minister of Defense's interview with the Australian interviewer that interviewed him 7 weeks later. 7 weeks later, he won't answer when he was first notified when the plane went missing, which is that's red flag number one. But then he said he contradicts himself in this, and he says that the plane was unidentified. But then he says that the plane was a civilian airliner and that it was not hostile, and that's why they didn't send up jets. And that doesn't make any sense because the most likely narrative is a hijacking narrative, right, at that point. Or if it's pilot suicide narrative, then you also need to send up jets, and how could you know it's not hostile? The only way you would know it's not hostile is if you have communication. That's the only way. And why did they not send up jets? Doesn't make any sense, right? Now, if it's an emergency event, then you don't need to send jets up, right?
Yeah. So do you think that they were talking to them, guided them out over to try to have them land on the water? And
yes, I do.
So do you think that the Malaysian, whoever they were talking to, didn't have any idea what was going on? It just dropped off. And I think about that scene in The Hunt for Red October where they walk in and show him the badge and just goes, "I wasn't here. You didn't see me. This didn't happen." I mean, do you think it was something like that where the plane just disappeared and they were like, "You're never going to talk to anybody about this again"?
I think the first question is like, how quickly did they react? I would imagine they should have reacted pretty quickly. They still had them on military radar, so they probably would have been able to react pretty quickly. But it's hard to say because they've obfuscated so much. Some people might argue that they didn't react by the time they got to Penang, which was 30 minutes later. To me, that's pretty unreasonable, but it could explain why they don't land. Because I think the most plausible reason why they don't land is that the runway lights are off. It's 2 a.m. Malaysia's a third world country. You got to keep that in mind as well. So the airport's technically closed. They might have turned the runway lights off, not expecting anyone to come in landing. And if they don't have communication, then, or they're not ready for them, whatever, then you could see why they might fly over it. But if it's a fire, then you could say, well, the landing gear might be damaged. It might not be safe to land with a belly full of fuel. And you might not be able to dump fuel because of the fire scenario as well. It just might be too risky. And it might be a judgment call by the pilot at that point, right? And they might say, well, it's just safer to try to land in the water. But landing in the water, if you look at that Ethiopian flight that they try to land like literally right next to the beach, the plane rips apart the moment the wing touches the water. And then it goes into a barrel roll. Like a lot of people are like, well, you just Sully Sullenberger it. It's like, dude, the Hudson River is not the same as landing in the ocean at all. And even then, Sully Sullenberger basically pulled off a miracle.
Yeah,
so,
that was a miracle landing.
He's even admitted that he should have spiraled in, in some interviews. The other thing is to me, it sounds like there may have been more than one thing happening potentially. Like we've got all whatever's happening with the satellites, right? But you also have an airline that's got a lithium-ion fire on it. There's people on board. You have probably not as well-trained air traffic controllers handling it. And like you said, there's a plane full of fuel. It's a third world country. They're probably worried about getting sued and all this other stuff. And you got a pilot trying to figure out, how do I let these people die the least bad way? Because, doomed, like you said, right? there's not a good answer there. And it doesn't take much for the electrical and the hydraulics and all that kind of stuff again, if people don't understand what's going on with a lithium battery fire of that size, it is like nothing you've ever seen before. Everybody could have been doing a lot of bad things, and then it feels like somebody went, can we take advantage of this?
Yeah.
That's what it feels like. There's something bad happening. Let's test the thing.
It feels what I totally am on board with that, but but the plane disappeared. Like, how much more blatant can you be? Like, it feels very obvious that like something weird happened here, and they tried to cover it up, obviously, but it just seems like such a bold move.
Yeah, let me
disappear it.
Throw this out there for you too. So,
yeah, go for it.
Like if you have this lithium-ion battery fire scenario, like why are we having this elaborate cover-up? Right? Like, why aren't we? Because if it's a fire, this plane's not getting in the South Indian Ocean. It's not going for 6 more hours, right? It's honestly pretty miraculous. It makes it for an hour and 20 minutes to get to the point where we think our videos are happening here. So, if this is this situation where it's this lithium-ion battery, why do we have this huge cover-up? That's where the technology comes into play, because that's one of the only reasons for it. And now let me throw some other scenarios. You brought up the test out our technology because this plane's doomed scenario, which I don't think it's a super likely one, but certainly one that's on the list. I think that it's more of like, okay, we've got to save some people that are important on board this plane, or we've got to, we're trying to steal them in the espionage scenario from going to China because we don't want China to get this technology this intellectual property they have. But here's another scenario that I think I like the most now, which is, what if there is just one VIP who's got you got to save me. You got to pull out all the stops, right? Like, I'm important and I'm connected. To me, that almost makes a little bit more sense. Maybe they are one of those, engineers on board the plane. But that is just one person that they call on the bat phone, you guys got to deploy. And they're like, oh, we don't want to deploy. It's too much of a risk. What if China sees, right? They're like, no, you got to do it because my plane's doomed. Just thought.
Yeah. And I also always hold out the what I call the other option, which is the one we haven't thought of yet. Where it hits something we don't understand, and we happen to be looking at it with a satellite, and something happened, and somebody went, "Oops, a plane just vanished."
I would agree with you if it wasn't being followed by the drone. If
Yeah.
it wasn't being followed by the drone,
that's the thing I struggle
agree.
with too.
Well, see, I could see us following and tracking it because maybe we got a report there might have been a hijacking. We don't want somebody flying a plane into a building again. So I could buy us tracking all that stuff, right? And then poof, and they just went, because we know for a fact our government is willing to make data go away. All you have to do is go back to the Japan airline one that happened in the late 80s, I think, where the guy came and he testified at that big press conference thing they did with the Disclosure Project a little while back. And he's the guy who talks about how he was working under Reagan and he made a copy of the data. He was the FFA investigator. And he's the one who says they came into the room and somebody from the CIA types got up and said, "We were never here. You never saw this data. Give it all to us. It doesn't exist. You're all sworn to secrecy." And the only reason we know that data exists is he kept a copy of his own floppy disk and he didn't, and then he sat on it for 20 years, until he felt comfortable coming out. So we know our government will shut stuff up, right? Hell, we can even go further back. In 1947, we published, "We have a UFO." And then we went, "No, we were wrong. Sorry, it was a weather balloon."
Yeah, never mind.
Right? Let's be honest about when they started lying to us about whatever actually happened. But I just like to leave that other option because I'm always like, well, we don't know what we don't know, which is the hard part. And the other difficult thing for me, and I know there's no way for you to address this, we've got an uploaded video. We don't have the original, and I don't think we ever will, right? So you can do tons of analysis on it, but it's an uploaded video. So that by its definition limits the like metadata stuff you can start digging into and all that. And go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, so going back to the satellites here for just a minute. I was very interestingly following the whole Cloudgate, we'll call it Cloudgate, that happened over the weekend, which was really interesting just to sort of watch. What I found most interesting with that was the community response, which was, hang on, this looks weird, and this looks weird, and this looks weird, and hey, look, if I do this, and then all of a sudden it just, all the pieces start to fall in place, and people start, and you go like, okay, we don't really know totally what happened here, but this is fishy in a big way.
Yeah.
So that was has there been another? There was the initial one from the Corridor Crew video, that Danny and that whole thing, and then now this has there been another thing that's happened, or have those been the only two big pushes?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Corridor Crew thing was just a rehash of like the Metabunk forum. Like they didn't even come up with anything original at all. Like that was honestly just pathetic. Frankly, I mean, I don't know how else to put it. Like at least do your homework and look and see what stuff has already been refuted, right? As opposed to just repeating a bunch of stuff that's false, which was like, honestly, I felt like they felt slighted by that, but it's like, it was their own fault. Like do your own homework, man. Like they didn't come up with anything original. At least other people have tried to come up with original stuff. And it honestly felt like when this cloud debunk thing came up, like that the government felt like the narrative was like getting out of hand, right? Like the momentum was getting huge. Like some of my posts were getting like 2 million views, stuff like that, right? And it almost felt like they were like, crap, engage Operation Clouds in the picture, right? Because like the story of finding these clouds makes no sense at all. And the amount, and again, it goes back to that coordination factor where like people were up all night, like, reposting it, and like it appeared at like 10 or 11, at night, really late, and everybody's reposting it like instantly as fast as they can. Oh, it's over, everybody look away, right? Even got me, honestly. I was like, my resolve was actually like shaken for half a day or a day or so, where I looked at it, and then I just thought about it more logically. I talked to this guy that makes this video, and then I started thinking about the story, and I'm like, this is not making a lot of sense here. Like some guy finds some picture on an obscure website, and somehow he's able to use his Rain Man skills to pick out the clouds that match. Like I'm looking at the raw data pictures, and I'm like, I can't even figure out which clouds are supposed to match. Like some guy's just eyeballing it and figuring it out in 20 minutes. It's completely implausible. Like the more likely scenario is somebody knew that a picture had been planted, that you go find it, and then you go tell this person that supposedly took it, and maybe they don't even know. And you're like, hey, man, there's this picture out there. And then you try to get them to put their name on it, right? But the part is like, why is this person then making a debunk video within an hour of getting an anonymous email from somebody who's like, their email account is like, sorry, I dragged you into this.com. Like, if I get something like that, the last thing I'm doing is trying to get myself personally involved in the situation.
Exactly.
Right. But he's doing it right away. And I'm telling him, like, he reached out to me and I tell him, like, hey, man, you should be cautious about this. Like, and this was just my honest advice. Right. And, he didn't. And the reality is, like, it's starting to fall apart because,
Right.
one of the things that I was told as well is that, well, their site gets pirated a lot. So there should be torrents out there of all their pictures. So we start digging in and looking for the torrents. And this is where I put up my post called Hail Mary. I'm like, guys, they might have messed up big. Because if this is some kind of intelligence operation that I think it probably would have had to be to do what was required to get the clouds from the video into some pictures, then you might have to modify them. And it would most likely have used some AI tools in order to do that. It's hard for individuals to pull that off. But so we go looking for the torrents. We find 2 different torrents. People start digging around at all these old torrents that are related to this old website. The pictures aren't in there at all. And now I'm like, okay, now this is getting spooky. And the best situation would have been if we had found the picture and they don't match, because then we would have just won. It would just be game over. That would just be absolute proof that the intelligence community was pulling a hoax and that meant the videos were all real. The next best thing is we didn't find the pictures at all, which is like, okay, now this is really weird, right? Like now I'm starting to wonder what was going on here. And so that's where we are right now, which is that we didn't find those pictures. People are highly questioning this website and this person who owns this tiny website because the files were updated a week ago. And I know databases, guys. The files on 11-year-old pictures don't randomly get updated like that, Oh, we ran a database update. What, on every single row in your entire database? No, that's generally not how it works, unless you had some major update to your system. So a lot of fishiness around that right now. And because there's so much fishiness, the answer is, we're proceeding forward. And the last thing I'll say, too, is that people start sending me videos about this guy that is the one who makes this debunk, which, why are you making a debunk again within 1 hour? But then all of a sudden turns out he's a photo manipulation expert and he's a VFX expert as well. And there's videos of him like doing tutorials about how quickly he can add clouds to the background of pictures. And I'm just going, okay, well, now this guy is just we can discredit this guy easily.
Right.
And I don't want to think that he's a bad guy, but how can I trust people?
Well, so this is the human nature bit, and this is more my area of expertise. I think there are people. There's a couple of things that could be happening. It could be an organized government type thing, and I'm not discounting that in any way, shape, or form. But there are people who are just malicious and want to discredit someone, and then there are those people that something like this threatens their worldview so much that they feel compelled or driven to discredit it in any way, shape, or form. Everything's on the table for it. And that doesn't necessarily make them bad. It makes them terrified, right? Terrified of the other, the whatever that is. And I would, if I had to put money on it, I'd say you've got people from all 3 realms coming at you. Because something like this, you're going to get, and then there's the crazies, right? Let's be perfectly honest. There's some people who are just they're not all that put together, and they just take something and run with it for whatever. That's how you get those obsessive people. So I think you're dealing with a whole bunch of mess, but all this brings me back to there's a lot of smoke here. Yeah. So there's got to be some kind of fire. I just don't know what that fire is yet.
That's the same view that I have, right? Is that, and I definitely have all of those parties. Like if you were at Keith at the mic that I was in earlier, I mean, you will see that I call them my groupies of just straight up haters that are literally obsessed with me. It's to the point where it's a little bit scary because I'm not afraid necessarily of the government disappearing me. I think I'm a little too high profile for that at the moment. But I am a little bit afraid of somebody who's super obsessed, getting a little wacky. So that is a little bit spooky, but there's definitely enough incentive for a lot of people to do any of those things that you just mentioned, right? And for that reason, that's why we definitely have to push forward no matter what. And ultimately, the answer is if it is fake, the government should be able to come out and say that this is a big social media hoax that's going on, and that's not our MQ-1C Gray Eagle in that drone video, and that's not our cyber system. staring down at the plane at 1840 UTC in the Nicobar Islands, right at the same exact location where the official narrative says it turned into the South Indian Ocean, the same location where the Inmarsat data has this huge anomaly, the same location where Catherine T sees the plane, then goes inside her boat and comes out. There's no plane anymore. It's like, guys, we kind of have a lot of evidence here. Like, I'd argue we have more evidence than most murder mysteries that are out there, right? Like, Alex Murdaugh just went to prison. They didn't have any videos of him killing his wife and his son, but they still got him on the circumstantial evidence, right? We've got 2 videos, witnesses. We can isolate the satellites that were over the region at the right time. Like, it's pretty damning. And I don't think the government's ever seen a movement like this, where a grassroots movement that, like you guys were talking about earlier, we don't even need mainstream media, because alternative media's got so huge now, where in some weeks I'm getting more impressions than CNN is getting. So there is a huge amount of people who are seeing this stuff, and it's opening people's eyes up. And, we're not going to be able to convince everybody. The last thing I would say is that, to the point, the people that are terrified of this, it doesn't matter how much evidence, they're never going to believe it because it's terrifying.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so I'm not sure humanity is really ready for this yet. And it might be the reason why the government hides it. That's why they would have a slow disclosure process, why they have to have the disinformation campaign, because they're afraid it's going to break people's actual minds. Right.
Yeah.
So they're not wrong. I mean, they studied it. They studied that. They did actual research into whether we should tell people if there's aliens or not, and they came back with no, not a good idea yet, right?
Exactly.
So
sorry,
what's
Daniel,
the next? What's the next step here, like, for you? I mean, obviously you're going to keep talking to people and talk, like, but where's your goal? Where's your next target at?
Yeah, I think the goal is to try to make it self-evident, to try to force the government to make a statement. Because in my mind, I bet they are not allowed to lie about something like this. Because if they lie about it, it opens them up to future liability on it. Like, if they lie about it, then... And I think you'll notice, if you look at the official narratives out there, a lot of times they just stay quiet when they can't say something that's false. Or they've said like the Cyber system didn't detect any explosions. That's technically true. It's not an explosion we see in the video, right? So if we can even get them to come out and say we can't confirm or deny it, then that's as good as an admission in my mind, right? And the best case scenario would be they say, yes, we are filming MA370, but maybe they try to come up with some BS about how the teleportation part's not true. Like, in my mind, as long as they say that's MH370, I can at least rest easy that we got the answers for the families. The science part of it, like, I'm not sure humanity's ready for it anyway.
Yeah.
So there's a few ways it could end. I don't know exactly. Like, I've got stuff in the works that I'm keeping close to the chest just because I don't want it to get tainted, let's say.
Of
right?
course.
And I've got people talking to me that I would never have thought I would talk to in my whole life. People that are connected, some people that are telling me that, yes, this technology is real, it's being hidden. I've been trying to backdoor into talking to politicians as well. I've got podcasters who are very connected who I've been talking to. I've got influencers that I've been talking to.
Nice.
And one thing that just came out today was that somebody emailed me for the first time saying, I know who Regicide Anon is, the person who uploaded that video. Like, they were somebody who I know. And, it's hard to, how do I confirm that? I'm not really 100% sure. But the way they've been talking to me is a way where it seems very credible. I mean, it could be all nonsense. But one of the things that I can report on now, which I got their permission to say, is that they're not an American. And we actually didn't think that Regicide Anon was an American. They didn't say exactly what country they're from, because this person is very concerned about their personal safety and safety for the person as well. But they said they're not an American, which is actually what we had suspected. I mean, just to be honest, we suspected they're from South America because they tagged, I think, a Brazilian Twitter account in one of the posts, like about the MH370 but we don't have any way to confirm that.
Yeah. That doesn't surprise me, though, because interest in this is much more widely accepted in Latin American countries. They're much more open to the idea of a lot of whatever this stuff is. And so that would make a lot of sense. Have you reached out at all to the airline manufacturer to see if they're interested in it? Because I know they are obsessive about what happens to their airplanes. They don't, because if something went wrong, let's say nothing weird happened and it's some massive electrical failure and everything, the battery fire caused it all, they'd want to know so they could research that. They're anal retentive about airplane crashes, even if they're small Cessnas. And I know that because one went down here not too long ago, not far from my house. We have a small airport here. And it was like a 40-year-old Cessna. Mm-hmm. And the Cessna people went over that place with a fine-tooth comb. So I don't know. They probably have government contracts, so they wouldn't be interested at all. But I don't know if you've reached out to them.
We're talking about Boeing, so here's the thing: like, if these videos are real, Boeing's implicated, and Boeing's going to get sued in the United States. In fact, there was a lawsuit that got dismissed out of the United States because they argued that Malaysia would be the better location. And this is huge because this is the difference between the families getting $30,000 payout versus millions in the United States courts.
Well, that makes sense.
And the justice, if you're ready to drop down this rabbit hole, the justice that dismissed that case in 2018 was Ketanji Brown Jackson, who went on to become Supreme Court Justice under Joe Biden. So, you know, if you do believe in the I scratch your back, you scratch my back situation, I mean, if these videos are real, the United States government is directly implicated in the disappearance of the plane, which means that court case should have 100% been tried in the United States. It would change that whole argument. So this is it gets pretty dark, folks.
We absolutely know that the Biden family is the most upright and uncorrupt and legitimate thing. That's sorry, I can't.
I got no comment.
Of course, but it's just on one hand, I would hope that they would want to fix whatever went wrong, but on the other hand, that makes sense. They don't want to get sued into bankruptcy.
Yeah, and that's the thing too here, right? So when we talk about like why would someone go to the efforts to potentially, let's say, fake some pictures that have clouds from our videos in them, it's, well, what are the implications of what we're talking about here? First of all, hyper advanced technology that's basically been withheld from us, that everybody's been lying to us for I don't know how long, at least a decade, probably more than one decade, probably several decades, probably unconstitutional, probably the reason why we can't pass any budget audits, probably going to implicate several people and several large third-party defense contractors, probably talking about people going to prison for the rest of their lives, probably talking about lawsuits that total up to trillions of dollars in terms of all the family members, all the people who've had disinformation campaigns run against them to hide this type of stuff. I mean, just the magnitude of lawsuits alone is huge. So not to mention all the prison time. So a lot of people have everything to lose if these videos are real. Not to mention some of the debunkers that they could be potentially directly sued. You know, I mean, I even set Alex Jones up in my interview there, said, hey, what do you think the consequences should be for people who are lying about these videos? I said, do you think they should be fined $1 billion? Because that's what I think the lawsuit against him was for, right? So people that are lying or going out there saying these videos are fake or whatever, like I would say be very careful. Like there's precedent that could literally end your whole lives. As well as, you know, just people going to prison over seditious conspiracy. I mean, we've set the standard now, seditious conspiracy, 17 years, you know? And this isn't a political issue either in terms of this. Like, I think that all the sides of our government are corrupt. And if this kind of technology is real, it's been getting covered up by all political parties for, I don't know how many decades, but a lot. And I would imagine that the president doesn't have much control over it, even going back to, I'm old enough to remember Bill Clinton coming out and saying he was going to dig into all this and then going on talk show hosts saying that, yeah, I tried to dig into it and I got blocked at every front, right? And this was well before I was really interested in it. But looking back now, I'm like, I wonder if like when you get signed in as a president, they give you the talk and they're like, here's the real implications of the technology, doomsday weapons, and all, you know, we have to have military supremacy of the world with this. And you could see how that would make people all of a sudden change their attitude.
Well, yeah, I think it's deeper than that. I think that presidents come and presidents go, so they don't need to know.
Temporary employees.
Exactly. It's the lifetime bureaucrats that are running a lot of this stuff, and it all ties into this shadow military industrial complex that Eisenhower warned us about. Kennedy looked at it, and they killed him for it. We passed a law saying, "Give us your records." And they just won't. I mean, probably the last president that had any inkling whatsoever as to what was going on was Bush Sr., because he was head of the CIA at one point. And I doubt he actually knew what really was going on. But just the idea that, and it makes sense, like they don't want you to dig into this. They want this to go away. Because if any government has the ability to make something the size of an airliner go away, that is profoundly destabilizing to the world, everything, right?
Yeah, that's breakaway
Because
civilization level technology, right? I mean, we're talking
Yes.
about you're on another plateau.
Yeah, I mean, you don't worry about your near peer anymore, because let's say it's the Politburo in China, and they're talking about going to war with us, and then we make the Politburo just go away. It's gone. I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen, but that is how destabilizing this type of technology could be, right?
Well, I mean, if it can teleport something, I mean, essentially what that is Moscow launches a warhead, and the warhead just reappears in Moscow, and
you
like
figured it out. It's a perfect defense mechanism, right? I mean, we're not afraid of nukes anymore. And Bob Greenyer even argued that there's a lot of other applications of this technology, and one of them is like an actual annihilation, which would be that sure, we can warp that, but we can also just completely make it inert and have it convert to some other material where it just falls to the ground, right, or whatever. So this could just be like perfect missile defense, perfect nuke defense. You might be able to deatomize people to some degree. Other applications that are less controversial is faster than light communication, force fields, cloaking. And then you start to talk about what you could do with power. I mean, we were talking about potential portable fusion power. If you can make a bubble around space-time, now you can have a sun that's contained within a magnetic, basically, bubble that's disconnected from space-time. You can have free energy. You can make a system where you're actually outputting more energy that's being put in because you're utilizing the latent energy of the vacuum of space. And then the biggest one, of course, is the doomsday technology, which is, think of it like creating a miniature black hole, which essentially would wipe out the whole planet, or there's plenty of different ways where this type of exact technology applied differently will destroy a planet. Even Salvatore Pais' paper, I think he's pretty coy in it because he's somebody that's a patriot who doesn't want to give the technology away, but he says that under the right conditions, you could amplify the energy strong enough to destroy an asteroid or planetoid. When I'm reading that, I'm going, scale that up a little bit. And then I'm going, I talked to Bob Greenyer about it, who doesn't have an NDA or anything like that. He just does low power nuclear reaction research. He says you could destroy a whole sun with this. And then I scale it up my own mind and I go, I wonder if we can create our own Big Bang with this. So the implications of this technology are massive, and this can explain why it becomes a national defense and security thing. The last thing I would say on that, something that you guys brought up earlier, is I think Congress is completely in the dark about this based on what I saw from Matt Gaetz during the UAP hearing, where he's saying I'm the only one that's seen this and it must be non-human technology. And I'm just going, wait, do you not realize this could be defense contract technology that we have? Maybe it's reverse engineered. And I do think that they're hiding scientific papers, not just experiments, but part of what's required to move faster than the speed of light is mass reduction. And this is where we're talking about the teleportation, is that you think of like a bubble in the ocean, but now we're talking about a bubble in space-time. And once you've created that bubble, now your local mass there is reduced to zero. Now you're completely ignoring gravity. And now one thing from talking to Bob Greenyer is, once you've got your mass to zero, how much energy does it take to move something that has zero mass? Very little. It doesn't actually take a bunch of energy to move it anymore. Now you just give it a little push. And now you can push yourself off to the speed of light or even faster, theoretically. So this is the part that becomes scary, because now those implications get really big in terms of what you might be able to convert it to and turn it into.
Which brings me back to, maybe there are legitimate reasons they don't want anybody knowing about any of this stuff, right? It breaks everything, and let us not forget, we're not that far evolved from monkeys with sticks that like to smash each other over disagreements, right?
Just quickly on that front as well, I want to agree with you, because I think that this is something I like to say, that really, I think my main motivation probably at this point is trying to push the conversation towards that, to realize that we are not the pinnacle of humanity as knowledge at this point, right? We're closer to cavemen than we are to understanding everything. And from that perspective, then it's like, it'd be easy for us to destroy ourselves. We need our collective conscience to rise to a point where we don't destroy ourselves with this technology. To my mind, this is the most logical answer for the Great Filter and for the Fermi Paradox, which is, why don't we see civilizations everywhere when we look up in the stars? Potentially, many civilizations that unlock this technology may wipe themselves out before they achieve interstellar travel or whatever else, right? And that's what I think the conversation should be about.
Absolutely. I think that's a great place to stop it. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
It's been a fun conversation.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, if you get new stuff, we'd love to hear. We'd love to talk to you again. So
yeah,
let me plug real quick. I'll just say if people want to follow along, at JustXAshton on Twitter. I've also been streaming on YouTube pretty often. I think we've built a pretty awesome community. I try to keep the trolls at a bare minimum. I'm ruthless when it comes to blocking and kicking the trolls out. Where now we create this community where we're having fun. We're learning about the science. I'm learning electrical engineering now myself. And then we're doing some memes and some fun stuff on the side as well, just to keep it lighthearted from, in between. And everybody's really cool. And we've got some very, very smart individuals. So if you want to follow along, come and join us.